And the Electoral Commission has concluded that there will be no new voters register for the 2016 elections, adding that the argument for a new register were convincing. This follows the Electoral Commission's review of a report submitted by the 5-member committee set up to consider proposals over whether to compile a new voters register or maintain and audit the current one. Joining me this afternoon via phone is Dr. Evans Agbedaku. He's the Lecturer of Political Science Department at the University of Ghana. Good afternoon and thanks for your time, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Now, knowing how critical the voter register is for the general election, what do you make of the decision and the report given by the independent committee, which leads the Electoral Commission to say that the comments given for the call for a new voters register is unconvincing?
Thank you very much for the opportunity and good afternoon to your viewers. You know that democracy has become the only game in town. It's a procedural matter. There are two key issues in there. What we call procedural democracy and a substantive democracy. The procedures or the procedural democracy seriously hinges on the argument that the procedures are as important as the conclusions. So here we are not going to be students of Macari and shout and friend at the end just by the means. No. The second issue will be the quality of public policies and programs that we issue out of the democratic process. But when we come back to the procedural democracy, elections are critical. But even though we can have undemocratic elections, there's no democracy that we can talk about in this contemporary time that we will have no elections. So elections are critical. And in the elections, one major ingredient will be a very credible voters register, which will determine fundamentally who qualifies to vote. It will tell us who eventually will be the winner. Because the voters register can help us plan, because that is what will tell us how many polling stations we want, either 29,000 or 30,000, how many electoral officers we need to employ, what will be the temporary staff that will be, how will the political parties recruit their agents, and how many agents and so on they will need. The election observers will all base their planning on the register, and of course the logistical support that will support in the polling stations among others that we are available. And so the real value really is about who really qualifies to vote. And for me, it's a priceless right. I've always indicated that the right to vote and to be voted for is a priceless right. And that is why the voters register is so fundamental. And so for me, going forward, what we have been looking at is how do we ensure that this fundamental right, which is priceless, which is the right to vote, is not undermined. Now, if you are going to have a voters register which is perhaps more credible, what it means is that the will of the people will not be reflected in the results that perhaps will be announced. And that perhaps can be a recipe for disaster in this country, and that is what the argument has been. One of the things that you really will know, that if you even the voters register will really determine the turnout, because at the end of the day, you are going to look at how many people voted. These are the number that you have on the voters register. That will help us to see how we are deepening our democracy and the level of participation that we are getting from the rank and file, talking about the entire citizenry and so on and so forth. So the major argument is how do we go about ensuring that those who qualify to vote indeed vote, and that I think that is the major issue. Yeah.
Now, I was coming to that, Doctor, to ask you that if we're talking about credible voters and even cleaning the register, from your point of view and your background, to ensure that all play a role in doing that, how can the EC do this? Is this going to be a very difficult task, as you were mentioning earlier on? How easily can they go about this, knowing that the elections is very close?
Yeah, you see, the chairman, if you look at the report, the 5-member committee's report, one of the things they have indicated or they have flagged is the fact that getting a credible voters register is a shared responsibility. I don't want to believe that they want to shift the responsibility away from the ECE and then they share it to all of us, that we are all responsible. But if you look at it, if you stretch the argument, what it means is that if people are voting, or if we all agree there are minors, which the former EC board himself admitted, if there are minors on the register, for example, whose responsibility is that? If people are registering in some areas, and some people are encouraged to go and register, who does that? So for me, I don't think that the political parties themselves themselves, can absolve themselves from responsibility. So to that extent, I will agree that it's a shared responsibility. But then obviously the EC has that constitutional mandate to ensure that we have a much more credible register. Who is there? Have they really investigated the various allegations that were made? And have they found evidence to rubbish these allegations as though they are frivolous and so on? But if reading the excerpt from the report that has been given to the EC, based on which they made this final conclusion, is the fact that I think the argument is so much skewed against maybe MPP, which I don't found extremely convincing. When they have said the arguments are not convincing. Are the arguments or are these allegations true or not? Have we investigated? Beyond the evidence that was submitted by the MPP, have we investigated to really realize that they are frivolous?
I think the EC did state clearly that they will meet with the MPP on that issue. But quickly before I let you go, the EC has come up with a conclusion on it. There won't be any new voters register. But the issue about the conversation of a new voters register. Now, groupings like, for example, Let My Vote Counts, in an interview did indicate that this report is bogus and they will not go by it, and they did expect something like this, and they will use all legitimate means to ensure that Ghana gets a new voters register. Should this conversation end once and for all, knowing that we're very close to having our elections?
I don't think that the thing is that we need to take entrenched positions as a people. What we need as a people is to see how best within the existing frameworks, how we can sanitize the system and make sure that at least those who are there. In democracy, elections, the processes are so wide and broad that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, some people will want to make some fine ways around them. So what you need to do is to tighten the system such that those who want to dream bad dreams will not undermine the will of the people. That is what we are interested in.
All right, then.
So consultations, yes, is important. And then we get all on board, build consensus, and then we move forward as a people, yes.
Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Evans Agwedaku, who is a political science lecturer at the Political Science Department, University of Ghana.